now do rotational motion B. Number 5. And in this problem, it says Ashok, who has a mass of 43 kilograms. So the mass of Ashok is 43 kilograms. Sits 1.8 meters from the center of a seesaw. So the radius of Ashok is going to be 1.8 meters. Steve, who has a mass of 52 kilograms, so the mass of Steve is equal to 52 kilograms, wants to balance Ashok. How far from the center of the seesaw should Steve sit? So the radius of Steve is going to be what we're solving for here. So for this one, since I want to balance, what I really have is that the net torque is equal to 0. So if I draw this picture, here's the seesaw, and over here I have the force of Ashok. Radius is 1.8 meters. Over here I'm going to have the force of Steve, and I need to figure out the radius of Steve. That's our unknown. So the way I have this drawn, remember that torques in the clockwise direction are negative, and torques in the counterclockwise direction are positive. So we have that the net torque is going to be equal to the torque of Ashok minus, because Ashok is in a counterclockwise direction, the torque of Steve, which is in a clockwise direction, should be equal to 0 if they were to be balanced. So when I solve for this, I get the torque of Ashok, adding torque of Steve to both sides, should be equal to the torque of Steve. And the torque of Ashok is going to be equal to the force times the radius. Force of gravity on Ashok times the radius of Ashok, which is just going to be 43 kilograms times 9.8, change it into a force, meters per second squared, times the radius, which is 1.8 meters. Now, the torque of Steve is going to be equal to the force of gravity on Steve times the radius of Steve, which is going to be 52 kilograms times 9.8 meters per second squared times the radius of Steve. So now combining these, I get that 43 kilograms times 9.8 meters per second squared times 1.8 meters are going to be equal to 52 kilograms times 9.8 meters per second squared times the radius of Steve. So dividing both sides by 52 times 9.8, divide the other side by 52 times 9.8 with their units, kilogram meters per second squared. I will get that the radius of Steve is equal to 1.5 meters.